So there are certainly things which happen within the brain itself, but more latterly research has indicated the role of the nervous system in the rest of the body, primarily through vagus nerve, which is a major part of this autonomic nervous system, which controls and regulates all of the internal organs and the internal world of the body. It can have an upregulation of and a sensitization of that nervous system. We can, if we experience a shock, we can get thrown into fight or flight type responses, or if we can't take flight, we might then freeze. So if we are able to process a shock event or a difficult set of emotions, then it can flow through. But if it's too much and it's overwhelming, then it gets stuck, and it either will cause us to try to run away or fight, and it might cause us to stay stuck in an agitated state in the sympathetic nervous system, or more often that's perhaps not, we're not able to run away and we're stuck with a set of emotions that one can't run away from, and therefore we will just then bury them and dissociate from them, or we may go into the dorsal vagal shutdown and a freeze response. And so really the healthy processing of an emotion is the optimal, but we'll either then go into sympathetic fight or flight, or a dorsal vagal shutdown. And when we're in those two, we're not really able to healthily process that felt sense and that emotion and that trauma.
Why may trauma be unresolved, and why could this potentially be problematic?
So we might put a link below to a very old video showing a polar bear during a sort of a pursuit where it's tranquilized, and then they watch it as it comes around from being tranquilized as part of a sort of a marine biology pursuit, and it tremors and it shakes. So it's taking flight, but then that flight is arrested, and so what the body wants to do to get away from the threat is stopped. And so it's got an incomplete discharge of that energy, if you will. Now, most mammals will do that. Humans tend not to do it as much, although if we are, one of the things that might happen, it doesn't have to, but one of the things that might happen in perhaps seeing I don't know, an awful gun shooting in the local town, then there would be somebody who may be shaking and blowing off some carbon dioxide and doing some different breathing patterns, and these things are entirely normal, and it's part of a healthy processing. Sometimes we can talk things through, we can allow the body to flow through those emotions, but either because the emotion is simply overwhelming, or it could also commonly be childhood. And this is another area that I work on a lot, because people say, why so much childhood? That's where we learn so much how to manage emotions and how to manage our nervous system regulation. And so very often, if our parents can't do it, then they don't know how to teach it, or sometimes they are the cause of the trauma, which makes it very difficult for the child to learn to process that. And so they will carry that adaptive strategy to cope all the way through their lives. And then that can just start to have an impact, because if the biology isn't getting the right messages through the nervous system, that's going to start to cause disease.
So how could this trauma manifest? What are some examples that you can think of which can be related to or caused by trauma?
Wow, gosh, well, quite frankly, almost anything. Almost anything. I mean, the more and more I look at things, the more and more I realise how much of the things that we see every single day in the medical world are, or could well be, created in part or in whole by trauma to the nervous system. So pretty much any autoimmune response can be, and any autoimmune disease can be created by trauma. because if we are stuck in a fight or flight and sympathetic tone, we will activate the immune system. We will send out inflammatory chemicals into the body because our body is thinking that it's going to need to repair or it's going to need to fight something because the internal world is not safe. And so the internal world says, where is the threat? Now that might be an internal bacterial threat, viral threat, or it may be an external environmental threat. Either way, the body is preparing you for that, which is great if it's there short term. But when it's there for years, you can really begin to see that that might create autoimmune diseases. This is where I learned so much about it myself, because I struggled for about 8 years trying to get rid of a chronic inflammatory autoimmune heart problem. And it was only really when I did this work that I was able to come off the drugs that were suppressing down that swelling in the heart. So any auto-inflammatory and autoimmune disease, Crohn's disease, IBS, chronic skin problems, pretty much anything. So other ways besides a more internal biological thing could be more functional things. So it might be panic attacks, it might be generalized anxiety, it might be depression. Depression, we think, well, gosh, how is that going to do that? What is depression? Well, it is to press down. It is pressing those emotions. Anxiety, in a way, is heightened emotions. Depression is, I'm overwhelmed and I'm burying them down. But really, the fundamental root is largely the same. It's about emotional regulation and sensation regulation in the body. The felt sense. The felt sense of being able to be in the body and then not be frightened of that and know how to regulate the felt sense of anything, the felt sense of anxiety, the felt sense of panic, of sadness, of joy, of fear, of irritation. Anything is a felt sense. And I often say to people, when was the last time you felt an emotion in your head? Never. We don't. We can't. There's no sensory nerve endings there. We feel it here, the lump in the throat, the tightness in the chest, a heavy heart, sick to my stomach. These metaphors are real. Of course, there's some processing neurologically in the brain. Of course there is. But it's not experienced there. And so we must learn to be with those sensations and to process them and regulate them. So we can get biological problems or we can get more functional problems. The other things might be even, say, Tourette's, for example, ADHD. These things can sometimes be that stuck energy again that's not being processed properly. And I've successfully worked with people with Tourette's, people with dizziness problems, chronic migraines, and sometimes that can be anxiety related as well and nervous system trauma related.